Hi guys, Ricky Pope here, and this week on the Christian Nerd Unite podcast, I'm joined by Lucas Pinckard of the Reverend and the Reprobate podcast, and we give our review of Marvel's Secret Invasion, plus scripture and nerdy news, and we'll get to all of that right after this.
Hey guys, this is Ashley Cox from Fangirling Over Jesus. At FOJ, we believe in hope and light in the darkness and that you are not alone. We seek to unite and celebrate the intersection of the gospel and our favorite fandoms, and we get to do this through our social media, our podcast devotional, and our cosplay and fashion. And you can find links to all of that through our website, www.fangirlingoverjesus.com, through our social media at Fangirlingoverjesus, wherever you get your podcasts, and on Etsy. See you online.
And lead me on to your kingdom come, surrendering, let your work be done. My life I give for the glory of your Son.
Thanks so much for listening to the Christian Nerd Unite podcast every week. Recently, we helped launch the Christian Nerd HQ podcast network. The network releases content every weekday. Christian Nerd Unite on Mondays, Tatooine Sons with David, Jesse, and his sons, BB Nate, and Samuel the Hutt on Tuesdays, Fangirling Over Jesus with Ashley Cox that you just heard from on Wednesdays, and the Reverend and the Reprobate with Lucas and Danley on Thursdays. And then the Speaking Nerdy podcast every Friday with the host Mike Schilling and myself. Go check out ChristianNerdHQ.com to follow all the podcasts, and check out the Christian Nerd HQ YouTube channel for exclusive content we're making together. Now let's get started with some scripture. Proverbs 4:20 through 23. My son, pay attention to what I say. Turn your ear to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart. For they are life to those who find them, and health to one's whole body. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And Proverbs 3:5 through 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Verses like this about the heart are very meaningful to me. Last week, we celebrated my wife's heartiversary party. It's been 1 year since she received her heart transplant. And I know these verses are talking about spiritual heart rather than a physical one, but I think it's a good reminder that our physical lives, the things we do every day, can bring wonderful scriptures to mind if we allow it. I wonder what scriptures come to mind when you make coffee in the morning. Something about arise or awake, or on your drive to work, something about wages, or something about, or maybe something like Colossians 3:23 through 24. I hope you'll take time this week to consider what scriptures can be brought to mind as you go through your daily life. Now let's do some nerdy news. Barbie leads the box office for a third weekend, adding $53 million domestically and crossing over the $1 billion mark worldwide. New release Meg 2, The Trench, takes second place with $30 million domestically and almost 5 times as much in the worldwide box office. Oppenheimer continues to do well, adding $28 million domestically and crossing over the $500 million mark worldwide, while the new animated film Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem comes in fourth with a similar domestic opening weekend number after some really strong preview numbers came in, and very few world markets. I'm not sure why that wasn't released more widely worldwide. We'll have to keep an eye on that one over the next few weeks. Marvel Universe role-playing game core rulebook has officially been released and is available to bookstores, comic shops, and online at places like Amazon. You may recall Christian Nerds Unite did some real play episodes of the playtest last year. It was great fun, and based on playtest feedback, the final rulebook does have some changes. The core rulebook is being followed up by The Cataclysm of Kang, an adventure book coming in late 2023 with new character profiles and features a series of 6 interlocked adventures, which can basically be used as a campaign. And then in the spring of 2024, they will be releasing the X-Men expansion. It will contain new options for creating characters, new traits, new tags, and new powers. It also includes new profiles for dozens of characters from the X-Men, X-Force, and the New Mutants. And then a Spider-Verse expansion is scheduled for late 2024. I can't wait for all these books to finally get released. I've put some links down in the show notes below where you can get your copy or pre-order some of the ones that are not yet released. This week, I give my review of the Disney Plus Marvel series Secret Invasion, and I'm joined by Lucas Pinckard of the Reverend and the Reprobate podcast. There will be spoilers, so be aware. Let's get right into our review. Lucas, it is so great to have you on the Christian Nerds Unite podcast today. You've been with us before, but today is a little bit different. Today's a little bit different. This is going to be less of an interview and more of just you and I talking about Secret Invasion and what we thought of it, kind of our review and kind of bouncing some things around and see what interested us in this particular project versus maybe some others, or what the good, bad, the indifferent kind of ideas.
The good, the bad, and the AI. You want to call it?
Yes.
Yeah. All
yes.
right.
The good, the bad, the AI. Well, since you mentioned AI, why don't we start there? So the story goes that the opening credit scenes were developed using some AI features. And according to Disney, no animators were harmed in the making of the credits.
Yeah, right. Like that's such a weird way to phrase it, the way that they did.
Yeah, they basically said that nobody was replaced, but AI was simply an additional tool that the animators had. What do you think about that? What did you think about the opening credit roll anyway?
Man, so the first time that I saw it, I loved it, and I knew that it was AI. It's really, really bizarre, and
Yes.
having used in transparency, having used AI to try to help with. Because I'm not a super artistic person visually.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can write okay. Musically is where I've got most of my like artistic talents.
Mm-hmm.
If I try to draw something, it sucks. Like there's no like middle ground, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just terrible as a visual artist. And so like I've used AI in order to try to relay concepts to people, and most of the stuff that I do turns out about what we saw as the intro into that. Where I'm like, no, yeah, that's supposed to be like, it's a face, you get it. So I was curious more than anything, but I do think that it fits the tone of the show, because the tone of the show is that you're supposed to feel disconnected from everything. My personal feeling on it though is, as far as like the overall use of AI for the opening, is I think that releasing that information did a tremendous disservice to the people who listen or who watch the show, because I think so many people's opinions of the show were colored by the, hey, this is AI. And like we covered it on the Christian Nerd HQ download. We talked about that it was AI and all of that stuff. And one of our big hesitancies in doing that, or, as we're talking about it, we're prepping the script for that one, is like, if people know that it's AI, they're going to come in with this preconceived notion that this show is bad. or that, you know, they're going to have like their ideology is going to be projected onto the program, whether or not
Whatever
they
their
agreed or disagreed with the decision.
whatever their
Right.
thoughts on AI are is
Yeah.
going to then flavor the remainder of the show. I could see that. I
Exactly.
could
And
see
so
that.
that more than anything, like it was a really creative use of AI. I think it, like I said, I think it fit the tone of the show, but I also think that it probably colored everybody's opinion going into it, because I haven't found very many people that are in the middle ground in AI. There's not a lot of people that are like, oh yeah,
Yes.
we'll see what happens. There are those who are like, I absolutely hate it. And those that are in the camp of, you know, we need to be protecting John Connor, but there's nobody kind of in the middle on any point. So yeah, I dug it. I thought it was, you know, it really helped to kind of fit the tone of the show, but I understand why some people had issues with it.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I'm not positive I loved the intro. The you know, the abstract, it was interesting. But it was so far removed from anything we've really seen before from a Marvel project that it seemed odd to me. I did I do like their use of color and symbolism along with the show. You know, with the world turning green.
Right.
You know, there was lots of things I really did like about it.
Yeah, and there's some interesting coloring within the show that kind of matches
Mhm.
that also, especially like in the sequences coming right after the intro. So
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you get, as I recall, I don't have it in front of me, but as I recall, green and purple were kind of the two of the main colors there.
yeah,
And so that kind of does play into the show in that you know, one of the big things is for Nick Fury is we see him in his little purple stocking cap that he wears.
Mhm.
And then we've got the green of the Skrulls. So I thought it was interesting. I am kind of in the camp of I'm not fearful of AI.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I've used AI in different things, and I
Sure.
see it as a tool that can be useful.
It also
But
sees you as a tool that can be useful, and that's the danger, Ricky.
now I willingly admit there's some, you know, in the future there can be some really weird things that
Yeah,
that
for
AI
sure.
could be used for. But what I see right now is it's a interesting tool in the hands of people who know how to use it well,
Yeah.
which means you're going to have some experts in how to use it. Which makes me kind of go along with the idea of, you know, the way Disney, you know, laid it out, that AI was simply another tool in their toolbox.
Right.
And I can see how that can work. I mean, I've done some animation stuff. I've worked in Adobe After Effects, and there are things in there that are kind of AI like in
Yeah.
that, you know, if I want something to move from here to here, I don't have to draw every single little frame, and I don't have to move it by hand constantly to make it move. I can tell it, I want it to start here, I want it to end there, and I want you to be slightly
Kid
random in between.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that AI? Is that AI animation?
Yeah.
And when you look at it that way, you know, where is AI different than a you know, an algorithm that was built into Adobe After Effects? Now, that's big philosophy stuff. It's kind of outside the
Sure.
purview of our conversation, but that's kind of where I've looked at it. But I did come back to you liked the intro. I thought the intro was interesting, but I'm not positive I liked it. It was weird.
I like I said, I think it fits it was weird. I think it fit the tone of the show, but I don't know that you could, like, that would have been a terrible intro for Miss Marvel. Like, it just would have been,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
You know, but I do like you said, with so many questions surrounding it, it was always really strange to me that Disney was so, especially Ali Salim, that he was so adamant about making sure people knew that's what it was. And I'm not sure, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist of any, like, there's a few of them, because like everybody's got to believe in some conspiracy theories, or else you're just way too trusting. But there is something to, I think, the with all the strikes and things that are going on, like in the midst of that they're releasing that this was an AI thing, and that there were people that were specifically hired to do this, because that is of everyone that's involved in those strikes, right? You've got the writers, you have the actors, the animators aren't in there. You don't have the groups where, of all of the extra folks that are in the background with your gaffers and, your ADs and all of those people aren't represented in that. And then these are the decisions that they're making. So I felt like it was one of those things that it made a really weird secondary statement, that there was something more to the, like, hey, we're using this in this thing. So, is he trying to highlight it? Is, what's the purpose of saying it other than, to just say, hey, this was a thing that we experimented with? It seems like there was something more to that. So,
yeah, without getting too much more into it, my guess is that
let's speculate irresponsibly about the agendas at Disney.
I think they just wanted to get ahead of the press, because
probably
they knew with
Yep.
the strike coming, and knowing that one of the contentions of the strike was AI usage.
Yeah.
That would be one of those, well, see, they're already doing it.
Yep. I bet you did. You know what?
So rather than letting the union reps use that as a tool against them, they tried to get out in front of it.
Are you trying to tell me that Disney is making smart business decisions?
I'm not saying they're making smart business decisions. I'm just saying they're making business decisions.
Yeah, there you go. They're making the CYB. That's the Christian version. The cover your bottom business decision.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the cast.
Yeah,
now,
let's do it.
Obviously, we have Samuel L. Jackson. He finally has his own project for Marvel, and I was super stoked about that. And I thought he did a really, really good job in this series. He's a different Nick Fury than we've seen in the past. He's more tired. He's more worn.
He's our age.
He is. He's our age.
That's what happened. Nick Fury got our age. And so this is what happens when you become our age.
He's beaten down and struggling.
Yeah, his little adopted baby Skrull ran away and is hurting people, and there's a lot happening for Nick.
But I thought he did a really good job. How did you feel about him in this series?
Look, I don't think Sam Jackson has made a bad movie. Right. I think he's been in some bad movies, but I don't think he made the movie bad. Right. So that's there's a big distinction there. But I think this particular performance that he delivered is a Nick Fury that's very different. And we get into all of these big arguments, I think, particularly about the way that characters change over time. When they've gone through traumatic events. Like, this was one of the big things when we're looking at Luke Skywalker in episode 8. It's like, this is not how Luke behaves. Well, okay, Luke went through some pretty traumatic stuff. So, like, maybe this is him now. Maybe Luke Skywalker does actually behave like grumpy Mark Hamill. Like, those opinions are my own and not those of Christian Nerds Unite. But right, so like maybe that is the case. So I do think that there is something to that. Like, what happened because of the blip, like what happens to him when he just fades away, and then time moves on. And I think some of those things were addressed in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Like, there were parts of that were addressed that had to do with like how society handles it, but even still, we didn't get a lot of like how the individual handles this. Like, what happened to those people who existed in those moments, kind of outside time, space, and matter, that come back in. 5 years has passed. Their relationships are different. All of these things have happened and have changed all around them. That they're intaking a lot of things. And for Fury, he didn't stop it. And I think that there's some guilt associated with the toll that it took, particularly on Avengers, on the team that he put together, the toll that it took on the Avengers, and he not only wasn't present whenever that happened, but had no part in the decision making, that they were leaderless, right? And the last time we kind of see them all together, you know, prior to that, is like they're coming together to fight Thanos, but they've had this huge fracture. So he doesn't get to see any of the reconciliation. Like everyone is like enemies uniting against a common evil, and all of that stuff happens without him. And so it's one of those, like, if you've ever looked at you know, like a band or something like that, right? David Lee Roth is probably a great example, right? So David Lee Roth is the lead singer for Van Halen. He leaves, Sammy Hagar comes in, they have a few hits, and then David Lee Roth comes back, and now he's got to sing the other guy's songs, like stuff that he didn't know, stuff that he didn't write. And so like now it's this whole like, where's my place in this thing? And does it still exist? And I think that that's one of the big struggles that Fury has, is like, where's my place in this world that now no longer has this team that I put together, but they made all these decisions without me. I don't know the ins and outs of everything. And I think Sam Jackson does a wonderful job of portraying a Nick Fury that is trying to wrap his mind around his age, wrap his mind around a world that he doesn't know and that he's struggling to understand. And in dealing with a problem that he caused and feels responsible for, that could, it's not necessarily this cosmic level event like we see in Quantumania or you know, like we have in the Eternals or those kind of things, but that could literally like just destroy the civilization that he's worked his entire professional life to protect. And I really think he hits the nail on the head with his character and with his performance throughout. He really makes you feel what Fury is going through, even though at moments you may not understand him, because he's still a bit of an enigmatic character, even still.
Definitely. So let's look at some of the other actors. Now we have, I think this may be one of the best casts of any Marvel Disney Plus show so far.
Of any Marvel property so far, especially the series.
Maybe any, but maybe any Marvel thing. Definitely, I think it's one of the best, probably the best cast of any of the series. And for me, the standout is Olivia Colman.
Okay.
Her portrayal of Sonya Falsworth is amazing. I have loved Olivia Colman for many, many years. First thing I ever saw her in was a British show called Broadchurch, and where she's a police detective. And I've always thought she was just a great actress. And she definitely, in my opinion, she definitely does not let us down in this show. What were your thoughts of Sonya Falsworth?
Man, I thought she was brilliant, and I use that because that's the way that the British people would say it. So I really do. I thought she was absolutely brilliant. Her character was fun. It led us into kind of as we're sort of peeling back the curtain on Sam Jackson's character, on Nick Fury. You see that he does have these very intense relationships with other intelligence organizations kind of around the world, that they're all aware of what's going on to a certain extent, that they're working with one another. But her ability to like flip this switch to go from like, oh, I'm sweet, and then now I'm poisoning your blood and you need to give me these answers or you're gonna just basically burn to death, and then like I'm gonna sneak out the back, and all the while maintaining like this very lady approach to all of it, and doing it in such a way that like at any point in time she could, like, they could have just brought her tea and it wouldn't have been out of place. Like, she's torturing a guy, and yet like, oh yeah, here's your afternoon Earl Grey. So, you know, make sure, would you like some milk, ma'am? And then walk off. And it wouldn't have fazed me at all. It brought up kind of some old Judi Dench type memories of like Judi Dench of like, yes, I'm completely like vicious in this role, but that does not mean I'm not a proper British lady all throughout it. I thought her portrayal was great. And by keeping that persona, it also brings a levity to the role that allows you to kind of like feel the intensity, but also to take a breath, because it's like, oh, she's actually who's in charge. Like, this is fine. The boss is in the room. Everything's going to go according to plan. And then she disappears. So she also brought, that sort of, I wouldn't necessarily say a calming effect to it, but in her scenes, you knew who was in control and what was going to happen. And so it was fun. It let you relax a little bit from an intense moment to like, oh, she's running the show. Everything's going to go according to plan for the the next 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll pick up Nick's mess here in just a little bit.
I totally agree with you, and also, she's one of the few people that you see step into a scene with Samuel L. Jackson, and she just stands toe to toe with him.
Yeah,
and no, I mean, with her wit and her timing, her acting ability, it absolutely spot on. It's not one of those when Samuel L. Jackson walks into the scene and he owns it. No,
yeah.
If Olivia Colman is in the room, you both kind of own it, and I'm not sure I can say one of you is taking over the scene.
Absolutely. And it didn't feel that way with some of the other, like with his wife, with Priscilla, like that felt like a great balance with, who else am I thinking of? With Olivia Colman, it felt like a good balance. When you went to the scenes with him and Don Cheadle, because it was like so much, and I think that there was an intent to make it feel forced, to make it feel like Don Cheadle was grasping. And I honestly believe that he has this sort of depth as an actor where he would be able to pull that off. Right. But it definitely felt like Rhodey was outclassed in all of these moments. Now, whether that was intentional or whether it is one of those things where it's a presence thing, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
If it was intentional, then that just proves, that Don Cheadle is as brilliant as we all believed that he was. And if it isn't as, intentional, it just proves that Sam Jackson is likely as imposing a figure as you would imagine that he would be on a set. So either way, I loved the shift in the power dynamic with those two, but you don't see that at all with Olivia Colman when her character's on the screen.
Absolutely. Let's look at one other actor real quick. Kingsley Benadire. Kingsley Benadire.
Yes.
I think he did a phenomenal job. And I have to say, I think he may be the best villain I've seen in a Disney property. It just the presence he has, I liked his motivations felt right. It didn't feel weird. It didn't feel contrived. Everything about the way of why he's a villain, where he came from, everything seemed to fit well for me with this character. And I thought Kingsley did a fantastic job. How did you feel about this particular villain?
So I'll sum it up like this. My wife and I went to go see Oppenheimer. And in the opening trailers for Oppenheimer, there's a trailer for the new Bob Marley movie. And I wanted to punch Bob Marley in the face as soon as he came on screen, because it is Kingsley. He plays Bob Marley in the Marley biopic. But as soon as I saw him, I was like, that's a Skrull. Get him off. Like, shoot him now. Like, get rid of him. And so like he connected so well that like both. And I was like, is that your reaction too? She's like, absolutely. This is not One Love. Like, we've been infiltrated. And he's just completely changed his plan. Like, we were ready for Nick Fury to beam down in the middle of, this Bob Marley thing and be like, well, no, he's changed tactics, but it's still the same evil dude. Like, go get him. And I love that because it means that he is connecting with his audience in a way. Like, even when you see him in something else, it's going to be really hard. And I want to see, as a music lover, I want to see the Bob Marley pick, but it's going to be really hard for me to detach those two. And I'm so happy that it's a year away so that I get some distance between this. But I would say, he's on the same plane as I don't know, I think I'm pronouncing this right, but Chukwudi Iwuji, who is the guy who played the High Evolutionary in Guardians 3. That right, like those two have hit a point with Disney villains, or particularly with Marvel villains, that like this is a bad guy. That there is no, they've moved away with Guardians Volume 3 and into this, where they have moved away from the sympathetic villain. Like it's not the like, okay, I can see Thanos' point here, and I understand, why maybe this guy's feeling this way, or why Loki is doing these things, or Gore has this redemption arc at the end of Thor: Love and Thunder.
Yeah.
This is not that at all. These are bad guys. They're evil guys, and they're turning on everyone around them who is supposed to be helping them out. And you, not only do you want the good guys to win, but the subordinates also become sympathetic characters. And that's when I really think that you've got a great villain. When you have you're Amelia Clark's, and you're looking at her and you're like, get out of there. Like, please get out. Like, you need to escape the clutches of this dude, because he's a psychopath and he's going to hurt people. And I forget the name of the Skrull you're introduced to at the first episode, and that later, spoiler alert if you're listening to this.
Beto.
Yeah. Okay. So Beto later he gets killed, but the whole time, like every scene he's in the background, I'm like pulling my hair out, and I've got plenty of it. And it's like, what is going on? Like, get away, like, dude. This is such a bad situation for you to be in. Yeah. Even though he's fighting for the enemy, right? That he's on the bad guy's side. You want to see them get out from underneath the clutches of this villain. That's when I think that that you have a great villain, is when you can see the redeeming qualities and all of his second tier of underlings, where you're like, please get away from this guy. I see redeeming qualities in you. This dude does not have them. You're all gonna die. And I mean that's what happened. And I think because they cashed in on it, that's what made it so good. Yeah. Was if that thread totally is there and then you don't, that it's one of those, it's one of the things with Kylo Ren that I loved about The Force Awakens, is because in The Force Awakens, you see him throw these massive temper tantrums, and then you don't really see it again. Like, the threat of this unhinged dark side character is so apparent in his immaturity and his inability to control his anger. And then when you don't cash in on that, you sort of diminish the potential of evil for that villain. And they didn't do that with this character, man. No. Gravik goes all in, and he becomes exactly what I want of the Super Skrull. He becomes this really intense, intimidating enemy that's like, how are we going to defeat him? And he's probably going to kill everybody. And this is where we start the Wastelanders story. Yeah, I'm right there with you. That doesn't happen. Yeah, exactly.
I'm definitely right there with you. I have railed against this idea of the sympathetic villain for a long time.
Oh, it's terrible.
I want my bad guys to be bad. Yeah. I want my good guys to be good. Now that being said, I'm okay with there being a legitimate explanation for why they became a bad guy.
Sure. Who doesn't love a good origin story?
Yeah, exactly. I'm okay with it making sense, and then not just being evil for evil's sake.
Right.
But I want that. I don't want that I feel bad for the villain. No, I want to not feel bad for the villain.
Yeah.
I want to go, okay, I see how he got where he got, but it's because he completely ran off the rails.
Yep.
At some point. And that's definitely what we have here with Gravik. I think it was a great writing choice, and I think Benedict did a great job conveying that.
And if you look at like maybe the two greatest rogues galleries of all time are probably Batman and the Fantastic Four. Right. Yeah. And you've got all of these like other second tier villains that they have to fight. Right. So the Riddler, his backstory makes sense. You understand why he is the way that he is, and all of that. And then you get the same thing with Two-Face. You understand that. But with the Joker and with Ra's al Ghul, they're evil for evil's sake.
Yeah.
Like at a certain point, and you get the same thing with the Fantastic Four stuff with Dr. Doom in particular. Like, he has a wonderful motivation to do all of these things. I'm not saying it wonderful in the sense of good, but like he has a very strong motivation to be the way that he is, but you need him to be bad.
Yeah.
And if you're going to introduce what is essentially a strong Fantastic Four property in the Super Skrull,
Yeah.
if all of this is leading somewhere now that Disney and Fox are one under the MCU and you've got all of this like convergence that's about to happen, that villain needs to also be unhinged, whether or not the motivation is there. And I think they knocked it out of the park.
Absolutely. You actually brought up a great point. The Super Skrull is an interesting villain.
Yeah.
And in the comics, he's always kind of been associated with the Fantastic Four because we see the Fantastic Four's powers in the Super Skrull.
Yes.
Having not brought the Fantastic Four into the MCU yet, we had to find other powers. I thought they did an okay job here. I do think we kind of went off the rails a little bit story-wise by giving him all the powers.
Yeah,
that was not a great choice in my opinion.
Agreed. I what did they call the vial?
The Harvest.
The Harvest. Okay,
Which,
so they
honestly, the Harvest is a cool MacGuffin idea.
It is, and will you, for our audience members that don't know, and your special guest today, explain to all of us what a MacGuffin is? Because it sounds like something off the McDonald's breakfast.
MacGuffin in any story or movie, it's something that everybody is after. It's something that's it's the reason the story keeps going. It's mentioned early on, but it's not explained. And then as we go on, we find out what it is. And in this instance, the Harvest is the DNA from every superhero that spilled blood at what they call the Battle of Earth, that final battle with Thanos.
And apparently villains too.
Idea.
Right?
Yes.
Because Call Obsidian, like the first two powers that he gets are the power of Groot, right? And then you have Call Obsidian, and those are the only two that he's able to recreate, which is a pretty powerful duo.
He also has Extremis.
Okay, which is another thing that comes into this without any explanation of what Extremis is or how Extremis can be used, because Extremis can be anything. But there can be, you can use for those who aren't in all of the comic book depths that Ricky and I obviously are, whereas I remove my headgear to talk about this for a second. If you do listen to, it's mentioned in the Marvel's Wastelanders podcast series. So if you're listening to that, which there are season 1 of all 6 of those shows has wrapped up. They're starting season 2 of Old Man Star-Lord that's about to start coming out on Spotify, those are great listens if you want to. But Extremis is essentially like a nano type technology, which you can use in order to enhance certain things, but it has specific things that it does because of the way that it's manufactured. It's something that was done at Stark Industries. It can change your voice, or it can turn you into a telepath. It can do mind control, all this kind of stuff. Him having Extremis means he could have any number of powers, and then he gets the Harvest, which means he does have every number of powers. And so you've created this, old school, like early 70s Superman that he just has this incredible superpower toolbox that he can just pull out whatever he needs in there. And so now, we've got to figure out what pink kryptonite is going to be for the Super Skrull. So it did kind of jump it a little bit with the Super Skrull in the comics. Him only having the Fantastic Four's powers means he's the perfect balance to them, because he doesn't have to think about it,
or to any team.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Any small group of the Avengers is a good fit for somebody like Super Skrull in the comics.
Yeah, he's essentially a taskmaster with powers instead of, the photogenic memory.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. That's a good,
but
good way to put it.
Giving him all the powers seemed weird. And
Yeah.
this was the one area of the series, the fight between him and Amelia Clark, and her character's name is escaping me right now.
Gaia.
Gaia, that's right. It was so close to Kira that's what I kept wanting to call her, but that's her character in Solo.
Oh yeah.
But
Well, when if you listen to the other podcast I'm on, the Speaking Nerdy podcast,
Yeah.
Mike keeps calling Gravik Garrick the whole time.
oh yeah, like all the names are so close together. So anyway, he's fighting her, and that's the one time where I thought that the CG was lacking here, because they did an
Yeah.
amazing job throughout so much of it.
Oh yeah.
But as they're creating the powers and they're going back and forth, there are some times when it's really difficult to tell whose power they're using against whose power.
Yeah.
And the idea of giving them Captain Marvel's powers makes me wonder, all right, if they've got light powers, now I'm trying to figure out who wasn't at the Battle of Earth to think of like who they're going to pair them up against.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're going to have to pair them up against Kamala Khan. Is maybe this how we get the Black Knight worked into it? How are those things going to happen? Because it's going to have to be people that weren't there.
Yeah.
To fight against the Super Skrull. So now that makes that confusing, because he's a Fantastic Four villain who doesn't have any Fantastic Four powers, and yet the Fantastic Four seem like they might be the only ones capable of stopping him.
Yeah, this is going to be going
It's
forward.
a headache.
I don't know where we're going to go with this.
Yeah.
But so all these powers, I think,
is a super nerdy rabbit trail here that we.
Oh, I know.
we've
I know.
just run
That's
down.
okay.
Like
That's
half your
okay.
audience is like, "Nah, I'm out on this."
That's quite all right. So how did you feel about the storyline overall? Just looking at the whole story arc. Now, I want to mention something here. Almost every one of these Disney Plus Marvel series, most of them are very story arc oriented.
Yes.
And 1 or 2 episodes does not a story make. And almost to a show, almost every single show has gotten bad or at least poor reviews from a lot of people after the first episode or 2.
Yeah.
And what I have repeatedly said is, okay, you cannot judge this series based on the first couple episodes, because this is it's like judging a movie on the first act.
Yeah.
Because
I would agree in total with that.
Yeah.
Right.
This is more like a 4.5
for the ride.
Yeah, this is more like a 4.5 to 5 hour movie rather than an episodic show where this episode makes sense and the next episode makes sense and the next episode makes sense all on their own.
None of this makes any sense.
None of this makes any sense until you wrap it all up. And then even then there's some loose ends. But how do you feel about the overall story arc? Do you feel like the story was fairly cohesive? Do you feel like there were some missteps along the way?
I think it did what it was supposed to do, and that is that it took the MCU and it threw it in a blender. Because now you have to look at everything that's happened really since Civil War and wonder who's played what role in what, and whether or not there are characters that we thought were gone, if they really do exist somewhere in some kind of mind prison. I think that's the biggest kind of question that lies unanswered here. Is who is who, and who had access to what during kind of which time. Like it really did a great job of shaking up the MCU, which I feel like is what it was supposed to do.
Yeah,
it puts Nick Fury exactly where he needs to be as far as like setting his character up so that he's ready for the Marvels, which comes out here in just a couple of months, and it places everything that we know from Civil War kind of in question. But I have to agree with you. So many of these series in particular, because it's not a hero of the week thing.
Yeah.
That I don't think so Amazon's got this feature to where it says like verified purchaser whenever you go to review something, right?
Yes,
So that like
yes.
you can look at somebody's review and see whether or not it's useful. Like that needs to be like this person finished this. We verified that they finished the series. Now they have a review. Because after episode 3 or 4, I might have given this a 6 or a 7.
Yeah.
I think after finishing the series, I'm probably closer to like a 7 or an 8.
Yeah.
It's mostly going to depend on what they do with it. Like how much this affects the future of the MCU is going to really determine in my mind how good of a series this actually was. If they take all of this and then they do nothing with it, if there is no Gaia who ends up doing something, if this isn't something that's even discussed in the Marvels, if it doesn't even get a mention of like, hey Nick, how was your visit to Earth, right? Like if none of those things get talked about and this is just a throwaway thing, then I think it's an awful series, because like that it's a fun ride but it doesn't do very much. But if this does something for the greater part of the MCU, which it really did, just kind of take in a bottle and shake up, then I think that this has the ability to be at kind of that 7.5, 8, and maybe even higher rated depending on what the payoff is on it.
Good thoughts. I really enjoyed the overall story arc.
Yeah.
I have complained since the first Avengers movie that when they brought in the Chitauri, they created an alien race.
Yes.
And my instant reaction was, why are we creating a new alien race for the Avengers when you have perfectly good alien races in the Marvel continuity you could have used, like the Skrulls?
Yeah.
So then we get to the Marvels or the Kree, and then we get to the Marvels, and we decide, okay, we're going to flip the script and we're going to make the Skrulls the good guys, and we're going to make the Kree the bad guys. Versus, in the majority of comics lore, the Skrulls have always kind of been the bad guys. The Kree haven't necessarily been always above board, but they've been seen as, more the good guys than the bad guys. But I've always had a problem with that, just because of the history that's there in the comics, and they just decided to kind of ignore most of that. But I kind of like the idea that the Skrulls are kind of the bad guys again.
Yeah.
That we're finally getting this, because that was a big thing going into Secret Invasion. My big question was, the Skrulls are the good guys. How is there an invasion? And now, obviously with the series, we get that explanation and it makes a whole lot more sense. But that was a big question mark to me, was how are we going to make them the bad guys all of a sudden when we've built them up as the good guys, as helping? So I thought that was it was a good way to finally, level that playing field. Now you brought up Civil War, and you brought up, we got to question a lot of things. So So the big question is, how long has Rhodey been a Skrull?
It's a great question. Him and Martin Friedman.
Yes.
Right? Like you got to wonder those two characters, because you've got no matter where Nick Fury's got all these people all of these Skrulls planted, and in the comics and in the MCU, we kind of see that he, not only is he like going rogue, he does whatever he feels like is necessary to move the pieces on the board. My thought is that Rhodey has been a Skrull since he was hospitalized for
a lot of people are saying
for
that.
the legs. And I think that the guy that is impersonating him did so under Nick Fury's orders. And that when Rhodey was able to get up and to walk around, that the exchange was supposed to have been made around the time that Nick Fury gets blipped. I think that order because if Rhodey is recovering and he's doing well, then Tony will continue to do the things that Nick wants him to do. So Nick says, hey, look, we're going to figure out what's going on with Rhodey, because he's not walking around with robotic legs anymore. He's not going through all this other stuff. And that doesn't really seem to move the needle for anybody, that they all like feel like this is a normal thing. So I think that's likely what happened, that Nick was not surprised that Rhodey was a Skrull. He was surprised that Rhodey is still a Skrull, because that means that they've been disobeying his orders for longer than he knew. Yeah. That Gravik has been plotting this longer than he knew. And I think that when he finds that out, that's why there's that level of shock and that increased intensity and fury, because it doesn't mean that like, I didn't know that you were a Skrull. It means you guys have been plotting this and planning this long enough for me to now realize that you've lied to me for years prior to the blip. And I think that's a big kind of wake up for Fury there. It changes that. If that's the case, it kind of changes some of those moments in my mind to where like now he's really incensed because he missed it. He missed that this wasn't really Rhodey, and that he is actually trapped somewhere, and that they didn't follow his orders to make the swap. So of all of them, I think that's the one that's most interesting to me.
That's an interesting theory. Now, I had heard the theory of he's been a Skrull since he was injured.
Right.
But I hadn't thought of Nick. I hadn't heard the idea that Nick Fury made him a Skrull and then they were supposed to swap back, but they didn't.
Yeah, so I think that's a Christian Nerd idea. HQ original idea.
It might be. I like that.
Yeah, for sure.
I like that idea. I do. So let's. We're going to need to wrap up here pretty quick.
Okay.
Because we've been going for quite a while.
Oh yeah, and we're talkers. I'm a talker.
Yeah. I was gonna say we're both talkers, so we're gonna talk through a lot of this. But
yeah.
So in the end, we talked about Super Skrull,
right?
So we have Gravik dying. So bad Super Skrull is dead, but we still have good Super Skrull. I'm not sure where she's going to fit in.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned earlier, you think you're going to judge this on how much this leads to other, the future of the MCU. So here's a couple of thoughts I have on that idea. Number one, I think this is going to be, and Nick Fury, I think, telegraphs this. Nick Fury is on the phone with the president and says, what in the world did you just do? That is definitely one-term kind of president thing.
Yeah.
So I do think this show is going to set up one way or the other. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to happen, but I think this is going to set up the Harrison Ford, General Ross stepping into the presidency.
Oh, wow.
Because that is the storyline right now for Thunderbolts, is that when Harrison Ford comes, he is going to be President Ross, not just General Ross. So big question I have is, how's that going to move? Is that going to be General Ross runs for president against Ritson because Ritson is so off the rails that no one votes for him? Or are we going to have a military coup where General Ross steps in as president, interim president, because they had to, for whatever reason, they had to depose Ritson because he was doing some crazy Skrull conspiracy kind of things. The other thing is, with Ritson's comment, he doesn't say that the Skrulls that it's illegal to be a Skrull. He basically says it's illegal to not be born on Earth, which means some of the Avengers don't qualify. Some of the Avengers are now technically enemies of the United States per Ritson, based on that comment.
Starting with Thor, the greatest Avenger.
Yes, so Thor would be one. Um,
Right.
so I think that is going to be a contentious spot, and I think that could be a place where we see something that is already planned and could make sense. Um,
Yeah.
now, one of the other things is, you talked about we got to find a team that, it's a different kind of team to take on the Super Skrull if Gaia goes bad. Because right now we have a good Gaia, but could Gaia go bad? I don't know how that all plays out. So we have Thunderbolts. Could maybe Gaia is going to be their big, the fight that they have to
Maybe.
build this
Yeah.
team for. So maybe that could fit in, but I don't really like that idea. I don't think it's a good fit. Um, Something that's not on the schedule at all for Marvel right now is building a European, a London-based superhero team like Excalibur or I think it's called MI13 is
Mhm.
one of the superhero things that they could go with. Where we could bring in something like the Black Knight, and maybe you bring in somebody like Blade into this kind of dark Avengers kind of thing, but we put them in Europe. We put them in London instead of in the US. I think that could be something that could spin off here, where we could get Olivia Colman back as the Nick Fury of a new superhero team based
Yeah.
in London. That could be interesting, but it's so not on the schedule right now that I don't even
But
know
it
where they
is.
would find a place for it.
Yeah, so it is possible though. I mean, we've got over the course of how many movies we set up the Avengers that was never okay. So the first one's on the schedule, but Guardians isn't, and all of these other things kind of
Yeah,
fall into place. It has been all but confirmed that, as far as I've read, that Henry Cavill is going to be making his MCU debut as Captain Britain.
that would be
That
brilliant.
that is it is in all of the comic book rumors things and places that I've gone to that are reasonably reliable. None of them are 100% reliable. Is
Yeah.
that is where Cavill's going to make his MCU debut. It's going to be Captain Britain, and it's probably going to happen in Captain America 4. Like those are the things that are kind of swarming around all of that, and that supports that idea. I think the Super Skrull, I would let me put it this way. I would hate to see the Super Skrull be the villain in the Thunderbolts.
I would too.
What I really think you see in this is because of how we've set up Ross in the MCU, I think Ritson probably ends up getting himself either assassinated
See, that's
because of
another
this mandate,
possibility.
or
Or somebody thinks he's a Skrull.
yeah, or Ross decides he's not going hard enough, and then we see the Thunderbolts, and then we see Red Hulk,
Yeah.
and now we're into like a whole different sort of tyrannical arm of things. And then
we're looking at a Captain America movie called Brave New World,
yeah, and
which
so
is
maybe that's why
a pretty
now Captain
dystopian
America
sounding.
for sure kind of thing, and maybe that's kind of what sets up now Captain America is working to reclaim the United States for democracy and kind of get
Yeah.
us back to square, which I think fits in with the character of what they've done with the new Captain America, and Anthony Mackie is just a phenomenal actor, and whatever.
Absolutely.
I'm going to buy wholesale into whatever he does with Cap because I think he's done a phenomenal job with it. Yeah, I'm with you. I would hate to see Gaia be used in that capacity, but I do think Gaia's in this weird place where she is without alignment because she doesn't line up with, obviously with Gravik and what he's done. She is not going to be a fan of what's happening in the new United States. She also is still kind of stationed in Russia with the rest of New Skrullos and what's left of them, and working to kind of keep the rest of those people around and interconnected. Like
So
she's
you
sort of
said
setting
something-
herself up as as long as you don't become my enemy, I'm fine. But if you do, you're probably gonna have to call the Richards family back from space to beat me up.
So you mentioned something, and this is a big question mark in my brain.
Yeah.
Gaia shows up as Nick Fury. She looks around. She kills 2 guards up front,
Mhm.
straight up.
Yeah.
But then we see no more Skrulls at all.
Right.
We only see dead Skrulls. And my
You're
big
talking about a
question
new
was,
Skrullos?
in
Yeah.
new Skrullos, where did all the Skrulls go? Did Gravik go nuts and kill everybody? Or
He may
did
have,
they just run off because he was killing everybody?
but
So,
I think it's probably a both and. He killed everybody that stayed, but also they said that number was like 1 million.
well, right, 1 million across the world, not
Right.
just in New Skrullos.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a weird spot that I'm like, I'm not quite sure I understand what exactly happened. Why we don't see any other Skrulls along the way other than the 2 guards that were standing there. But
Yeah, that was a bit bizarre for them to just be guarding a bunch of dead and like maybe they didn't know, but how do they not know?
yeah, I know.
Like, does this all happen like in one watch? Like this
Yeah.
is a 6-hour period where all of this stuff goes down. And if that's the case, but that's quick work, Gravik and Gaia, not Kira.
Yeah. That was a little bit of a question mark I have.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, as far as where we go from here, I think Thunderbolts can have some leaning. I think Captain America: Brave New World. I think this can play into that. But I don't see any other films right offhand that I feel a strong. Okay, this leads into this, because it doesn't fit in very well with the Kang Dynasty stuff. It doesn't fit in with the new Marvels movie, even though Gaia has Captain Marvel ability. It doesn't. I don't see where it goes into any of these other shows. And then we see the postscript, at the end where Gaia and Sonya see, all these other people that have been taken over by Skrulls, hundreds and hundreds of people in pods. So is Gaia just going to be hunting all these Skrulls down? Is she like the Skrull hunter now?
Who knows, man?
But I don't have any other places where I can see it fitting in well. Is there another show or movie you are aware of that you think it fits in, that it has a good connection with?
The only thing I can think of, and I know I've mentioned it a few times, other than the Fantastic Four, because this could be a wonderful setup for the Fantastic Four where they're able to build Doctor Doom, and that plays heavily into Secret Wars. Because if that's where they're going, you have to have that guy in Secret Wars, or else it just doesn't work. At least I don't think you can do it without Doctor Doom. Now that they own Doctor Doom, they can do whatever they want with him. So I think we potentially see that. If not, I think the only other place where she really fits into this area where she might be of cosmic importance is into an Eternal spin. And in the sense that if what she ends up doing is going and looking at all of these different places that Skrulls have invaded, and so now she's realizing that those planets are about to have their end of life cycle, that now she's going to those places and she's fighting the Icarus and the Circe and all of those who have been planted on each one of those planets, and she is in defiance of the Celestials in that instance, that she's now going to preserve those worlds so that the Skrulls can survive. I think that's really the only other place that makes sense within the MCU, but that seems so far down the road unless they are making that is the new Secret Wars, that the Secret Wars is them fighting for the livelihood of all these other civilizations that are on all these other planets and universal existence and the whole deal, which that would just give me an ice cream headache and a half. So I don't know. I like I said, I think everything about this series and how I feel about it is going to be based on what they do with it, what it's built, particularly, Gaia and her character.
Yeah, there are so many other subjects in this show,
so many possibilities.
that we didn't even begin to brush up against.
Is Gravik really dead?
Is Gravik really dead? What will happen for the future for Priscilla Vera?
Mm-hmm.
Which I absolutely loved that relationship there.
She's so great.
Yeah, great actress. There's so many things in this that, is Maria Hill going to go to Tahiti, come back from Tahiti eventually?
Whoa.
You threw a big wrench into my brain a few minutes ago when you said, what other Avengers might have been replaced, because now they'd have to only replace Avengers that don't have actual superpowers other than basic strength. Because you couldn't really do a Thor.
No.
Because they don't just magically get all the powers of that person.
Right.
But
you could do a Scott Lang.
You could do a Scott Lang. Or now when we talk about people who are dead,
right?
You could, Scarlet Witch could theoretically come back. I mean, not Scarlet Witch. Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow could come back. Which I don't think they will, but that's a weird thing.
There's a lot of
she died.
There's a lot of stuff that has to do with the blip, and especially because the blip and the harvest are so linked together.
Yeah,
that they went out and they gathered that blood from the Battle of Earth, where they got everybody. But how many vials of individual things from all of the things that have happened over the course of time? Because in essence, from what we've seen in the MCU, you could have replaced Captain America.
Yeah,
because he doesn't use he created and is a superhuman because of the super soldier serum. Within the context of the comic books, he gets super strength, but he also gets super speed. He gets super endurance, but he also gets super intelligence, right? And we just don't see that in the MCU's portrayal of Steve Rogers. Right. So he's a potential. Bucky is a potential one, because he's just got an incredible skill set. To that effect, so is T'Challa. Like where are, and even though not all these people were blipped, there's so many of these things, or so many of these people that really, really become in question as to who they are and what they're able to do. I think it becomes a weird deal.
I don't think we'll go there. I feel like
I kind of want to see it.
Scrody will be our only.
Yeah. Scrody.
I think Scrody will be our only, Skrull Avenger, but that's one of those out there kind of ideas. How many other Avengers were Skrulls? Well, any last words about the show? Any last thoughts?
If you liked the show, don't read the comics. That's what I'll tell you. And if you didn't like the show, go read the comics. And for those who don't know, all of the stuff is on Marvel Unlimited. Yeah, and if you don't have a Marvel Unlimited subscription, I think it's at $5-10 a month, something like that. You can join Marvel Insider, and just by reading articles, you can build up points where you can get and it can pay for your Marvel Unlimited subscription. That's how I do mine. Is I'm already reading some of the blogs and stuff already. I'm building up those Marvel points. I've got a couple of Marvel phone games that I play, and I just put in my username in them, and we get instant points, and so you're able to build up those points. You can kind of do it for free. That's how I'm reading all of this stuff, diving down that rabbit hole. So if you don't want to buy the Marvel Unlimited subscription, you don't want to go look for the graphic novel, create a Marvel Insider account, stay up to date on all the news that you're already doing anyway, and earn some points and get it for free. It's kind of fun.
Absolutely. Well, tell the folks where they can find you real quick.
Yeah, man, you can check me out on the Reverend and Reprobate podcast, which is part of Christian Nerd HQ. We're at Rev Rep Podcast on all the social media platforms. And then a couple of times a week, myself and several others that are part of Christian Nerd HQ, we host a show called The Download, where we keep you up to date on all the nerdy news from your favorite fandoms. You can check that out on YouTube and Facebook.
Awesome. Well, I'll put links down in the show notes to all of that. Lucas, it was fantastic having you on the show today.
And a blast
And
being here.
I loved talking about Secret Invasion with you.
Man, thanks for having me on. It's been a blast.
I love chatting with Lucas about all things nerdy. Check out the links in the show notes below to listen to his podcast as well. Well, that's all I have for you today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, click all those links down there. That way you'll be informed anytime we put out new content. You can find all of our social links and links to the YouTube channel and our online store at ChristianNerdsUnite.com. If you enjoy the show and want to help even more, consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. We've changed all of our Patreon levels, and every level has great benefits and makes a huge difference in the ministry we're able to do. Supporters will also get to hear exclusive stories of believers we're serving around the world through our ministry partners. To check it out or to partner with us, go to patreon.com/ChristianNerdsUnite or ChristianNerdsUnite.com and click support in the menu. And don't forget to check out ChristianNerdHQ.com for even more great podcasts. Before you go, I do want to leave you with this blessing from Numbers chapter 6. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. We'll see you next week. Blessings.
Hey,